Welcome to the third and last video on the second enumerations of the U.S. 1870 Census. Part 1 discussed the 1870 recount history and locations that had federal recounts, including New York City, Indianapolis, St. Joseph, and 3 counties. I also covered 6 locations that may have done their own recounts. Part 2 concentrated on Philadelphia and her federal and 8th Ward recount histories, and the census sheet items and street addresses recorded from the population. I recommend you view Part 2 to better understand Philadelphia's recount and problems encountered in viewing the census sheets. Here's the topics we're going to cover in this third part. Take a look at them. Notice this slide's background color. What is important about that? I asked this on Part 2 and gave a hint at their video end. Maybe I'll do the same here. You get a star if you know the answer. So let's start off with what is the basic unit of the 1870 Philadelphia recount. Why is this important? Why is this important to do? Well, as Confucius said, the beginning of wisdom is to call things by their proper name. I agree with that, and we're going to try and figure that out. So here's an overview of the first part, just to let you know what's going to happen. We're going to be looking at trying to figure out what is the basic unit. Is it Philadelphia? What is Philadelphia? 28 wards, 92 census districts, or over 280 assistant marshals. I'm going to show you that again when we're through with the section. What is Philadelphia? Well, Philadelphia is both a city and a county. The city and county consolidated in 1854. Will one census district be enough? Well, no, Philadelphia is not my basic census unit. Next on my list are the city wards. Philadelphia in 1870 had 28 wards. A ward is on 1 or 2 census film rolls. Well, wards as census districts, too cumbersome. There's not enough of them, given the population of the city. But let's look at them in more detail. They can be used as a finder aid. I found this excellent map source for the wards of 1870 Philadelphia. The title is Genealogy of Philadelphia County Subdivisions. That's cute. It's available online. On page 70 is the 1867 ward map. The wards were the same in 1870. And here's a close-up of part of the ward map. You can see it's pretty detailed. Pretty good. I'm showing you the address of where this document is. It may take a while to load. Remember, you want page 70. All the main references will be shown on the show notes. I'll repeat them there. Another way of finding a ward number is to look up the street name on a street index found on city directories. You can see on this section of an 1870 directory a number of entries with ward numbers. And I'll point out one of them right there in Stratford Place. You could use the 1867, good for 1870, ward map or city directory street index to get the ward number of your address. More about that later. The ward number can lead to a census roll of about 600 images. Hopefully you won't ever have to thumb through that like I've done. There are more efficient search methods, but you could use the ward number in the one-step 1870 tool demonstrated later. I'll tell you about that more later. Assistant Marshal, I'm going to abbreviate that as AM. Going to use that quite a bit. They were the census takers on the 1870 census. That census was the last to use them. Quote, General Gregory has apportioned this city into 91 districts with 1 AM per district. This is from a May 31st, 1870 article. The next day was count day. If a person was alive on that day, then they should have been counted. Marshal Gregory oversaw the 1870 Philly counts, both of them, and hired the AMs. I counted 91 AMs on a newspaper article on the first count hires, but the census films show 92 districts, so I'm not sure what the anomaly there is. If we look at the recount districts, the recount was done in November. They used 92 census districts with over 280 AMs. That's 3 times the number of census takers that did Philly's first count. Could the 92 districts be the basic unit of the census? There are problems with that, which you will find out later. The Family Search website refers to the 92 districts as election districts, and I show you one of their their definitions of the film. It says Pennsylvania 2nd. There were 2 filmings of this. Philadelphia City, 2nd enumeration, Ward 21, election district 69 to 70. So, is that an election district? I couldn't find any evidence that these census districts are based on or correlated with elections. No mention in the newspaper archives I searched, no mention on online searches. I think they were created specifically for the census. There are boundary definitions for some of the 92 districts, but not for the 280 plus AM locations, except for the 16th district, which only has 1 AM. So what I'm going to do is to show you some of the definitions. Ward 1 and Ward 21 to 24 only show precinct numbers. There are no maps, no text descriptions of what those precincts covered. So here is from the National Archives film, Census District definitions for Ward 1. It's composed of 3 districts. And let me put labels on the top of these. The districts on the left. The ward precinct, in this case, is there. And then here are the list of the assistant marshals and their addresses. Notice that, and I'll zoom up one of these. Here is 1st Ward, 1st, 7th, and 10th precincts. So 4 AMs covered 3 precincts. Wonder how they did that. Wards 25 to 28, representing Census Districts 80 to 92, are unfortunately missing from the definition film. They're gone. Let's make them gone. Wards 2 to 20, with districts 4 to 68, show boundaries of each district within the ward. Now, this is very good material. So, I've cropped the definition page. This is boundaries of districts 5 and 6. Now, let me read number 6. It says, 2nd Ward, west side of 5th Street to east side of 9th, north side of Wharton to south side of Christian Inclusive. And 5 assistant marshals were assigned to District 6. Now, using those boundary definitions, I marked up on an 1872 map their borders. This was relatively easy to do and something that you could do as well from the definitions. And all this resource is actually on the show notes, the links to them. And I'll show you this zoomed in. And I think it's usable. I think that's usable. I put that online on the Steve Morse website, and there is the address for it. The tiny URL is a condensed address, but it will get there. It may be slow to load. If your address can be located or on the drawn census maps, use it instead of the ward number to find your census targets. But there are more efficient ways of finding people. The district number leads to one or more sections on a census roll using the One-Step 1870 tool demonstrated later. AMs on their census sheets, I'm going to talk about their coverage, use all sorts of terms to describe their area. District, division, subdivision, senatorial district, election division, precinct, township name, or no area name at all. Sometimes multiple names were given for the same area by the same AM. The use of district and division were the main descriptive words used by AMs. There probably were additional terms used. So I'm going to give you 3 examples of how difficult it is to figure out what was the standard given to these AMs to do the enumeration. This is an example from AM Crops. I think it's spelled, I may be wrong in this, KROPSS. First at the top of the sheet, we see District, 22nd Ward, 9th Precinct, Westchester Avenue. That's what the sheet would have. Now let me show you another page within this person's responsibility. And in this case, 5th has been added before the district. Now at the end of his sheets, he has a recapitulation. And now what does he say? He says that he did the 5th Senatorial District, 9th, 7th, and 8th Precincts, 22nd Ward west of Germantown Avenue. What's missing? Well, what's missing is the census districts. 22nd Ward had District 71, 72, and 73. Let me show you the AMs, the assistant marshals, before and after crops. And I'll blow this up a little bit here. The top is Manship, and the bottom is Jackson. And you can see that they describe their areas as 73 District, 22nd Ward, both of them. Let's go back to the district definitions. The 7 looks like a 4 on the left, but that's actually 73 and 74. And you can see on the right, the AMs, they all, including crops, did the District 73. So all 3 of them could have put down District 73. If crops did precincts 7, 8, and 9, then did Manship and Jackson both do 11th, because that's part of District 73? Or did all 3 have overlapping responsibilities? I don't know. Example 2, this is an eye-opener. Let me try and read it. It says, I guess it's his address on top, Philadelphia, November 19th, 1870. This certifies that the foregoing enumeration of the people of the city of Philadelphia residing in the 1st election division, well, that's not the important part. We'll talk about that. And in the streets running east and west in the 10th election division of the 1st Ward. Well, that doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. First of all, these, quote, election divisions are not census districts. I already showed you that the 1st Ward had census districts 1, 2, and 3, not 10th election division. But more importantly, census takers since 1880 have usually enumerated their areas block by block, not just along a street over a number of blocks. That's an eye-opener, and I could see that when I did some of the name transcriptions. Another situation showing non-standardization. So on the top, here we have Assistant Marshal Schumacher, and he says that he did the 1st and 8th precinct of the 25th Ward. What's interesting is you can see that his page 21, that's when this starts. There is no page 20. There are no pages 1 to 20. And then soon after that, we get Frischmuth, which I think is what it is. It's hard to read this. There's no indication of area that this person covered. And it turns out that the last page is 20. So he did 1 to 20. Well, that looks suspicious. Between the two, there's a joint certification oath between the two sequences, and it says that we hereby certify that the foregoing is a correct enumeration of our districts, the 1st and 8th precincts of the 25th Ward, and they both sign it. Well, that's crazy. Who did the 1st? Who did the 8th? How do they divide it? So I combined their work into a single census district. I thought that would be logical. And there is the translation of that, or transcription of that, on the top. So what to name the recount census units so we can be consistent, and if you find yourself on the image rolls, you will know you are in the right place. I decided that each unit would be defined as the ward number and then the assistant marshal's name, Ward AM name. In cases where surnames are the same, surnames of the marshals, the first name initials would also be part of the census taker's name. Okay, so I'm going to be using Ward AM as this basic unit. So let's review. We saw that Philadelphia was both a city and a county, and so there are rural areas within the city. There are 28 wards in 1870, 92 census districts, and over 280 Ward AM units. I try to be consistent with this usage in this video. So let's look at strategies for finding people on the Philadelphia 1870 census recount. The easiest way, of course, would be to use a name index. It's an efficient way of finding people. You don't have to know the census format, and it leads directly to the right image page. I mean, that's the way to go. And some hints, some general hints. Wildcards are often good in name indexes, so you can see the power of doing wildcards. Searching for children is good because usually their ages are pretty known, and they don't assume nicknames or changes of names. And the most important thing is to relax your assumptions. Since the recount in November only showed names, ages, sex, and race, there's little you can input on your name search form. You can't vary the input information very much. If name searches don't work, and the number of reasons why they won't work, try location tools such as census maps and street lists, if available. For Philly's recount, Ward AM maps aren't available. So, when there isn't an adequate name index, when things are so misspelled, mangled, and mistranscribed, you can't find their name on the name index, use location tools. You can document a missed residence. That assumes the census taker follows a predictable route. I'm not so sure that's the case in Philadelphia, 1870. For an address where the resident's name is not known, you're looking at the history of your house. You have the address, but you don't have the name. And lookups for common names like John Smith in high population areas. Where do you get 1870 addresses? Well, here's some suggestions. Probably the most reasonable one would be to go to a city directory. Go to a city directory. City directories are a good resource to go from a person's name to an address. Usually, though, only the head of the family is listed. Philadelphia is a large city. Don't be surprised to see many people with the same name, even very unusual names. Be prepared with at least their occupation, which is often listed in the directory, to use in the search. And if you don't have their occupation, maybe that will show on the 1880 census. A very good city directory, which is available from FamilySearch.org, That's a free website. You got to register, but it's free. Has this city directory available from their catalog. It contains 1869 through 1871 Philly city directories. The first part of each directory, I'll point that out here, has a street index. You saw a section from this directory before when I showed you that index. As you will see, I created my own street index from street names on the 1870 recount census sheets. So now that you have an address, what are you going to do with your street address? Well, you're going to go to the stevemorse.org website called the One-Step website. I have a YouTube video on the history of our census tools on the website. There are a number of different utilities. Steve Morse is on the left. I am on the right. And in the background is Dave Case, who unfortunately is no longer alive. We got together in about 2002 and 2003. And since then, this section of the website has increased dramatically, and we're known for what is called the Unified Tool. So there are a couple ways to get to the 1870 Finder tool, and here's one of them. Now there's more. I'll show you another one. So here I am on the U.S. Census section of the One-Step site. You can see the Unified 1870 to 1950 Census ED Finder. I click on that. I come here. The default is 1950 at the top. I change that to 1870. And then when I do that, I get this pop-up that says, for 1870, you will need to use the One-Step Large City ED Finder. When you click OK, you will be taken to that tool. Or you can go directly to the utility at this address. And I'll show this in the show notes. So here's the opening page. What it looks like. Let's go through the process. Now, this template was designed for the 1930 census locations that we created indexes for, street indexes for, which explains some of these extra steps you'll see. So the 1870 cities were done quite a bit later. The first one was New York City, and now I have done Philadelphia. So that's why when you select the state, you only get two choices, New York State and Pennsylvania. If we select Pennsylvania, it says select the city, and the city is going to be, there's only one city, Philadelphia, because the second enumeration of New York City and Philadelphia were the first ones that used addresses on the census sheets, the first ones. So now we're in the entry mode. We're in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, and we can select a street from a list of streets. And I'm going to find Stratford Place. I pointed out earlier, it's Ward AM district. So you choose from your street from the list. So we have a list here of all the names of streets that I found on the census sheets. A couple points here. Where do we get the street list from? Well, we get it from all the Ward AM street lists. Second, most people would scroll down to Stratford Place, but to save time, I typed in the letter T to get quickly to the start of the T streets. And you can see that's why the Tackawanna is there, because it's after the T's. And then I scrolled back to Stratford Place. Since Stratford Place was at the end of the S's, it was more logical to start with T, the beginning of the T's, and go backwards. That's a hint to save you some time. And then what happens is, after you choose Stratford Place, the utility says, well, hey, there's only one Ward Marshal unit, and the ED you want is 8/M pattern. And you can then go and view the microfilm. Then you can just go to the beginning image of that Ward AM microfilm. So let's click on that. And what you're going to see is the actual images of the 1870 census. They're not enhanced. If you want to use another website for enhanced images like Family Search, you have the ward number now, and on every other page on the upper right, you might just barely see it as a stamped number on the upper right, and you can record that, and then you'll know where to go on other websites to see better images. I want to give you a warning here that you need to check the page number on the upper left and the AM name. We may not be able to get you to the exact beginning of each of these Ward AM sequences. I think we'll get you within one or two, but it's a good methodology to always check the page number and the AM name. Well, that was an easy lookup of a small street in a single Ward AM. What happens when you need to look up addresses on streets that go through multiple Ward AMs? Well, I'm going to show you an example next. This is actually a street in 1870 Philadelphia. I'm going to use some specific terminology. That the address is on Lawrence. That's what we want to look up. And there are cross streets. Cross streets on the north is Jefferson and Master on the south. And on the west is, quote, the back street. Back street. Now, in 1870, that back street was called Brinton. But now it's called Orkney. And you might be coming to the utility using a modern map to find the street names of the block. I'll look at that later, problems associated with that using Orkney. I mean, you do what you have to do. So what you do is now you go to the select street, you open it up, and this is actually the front, the start of the streets. And notice I didn't include compass modifiers to third, it could be third, south, or north, because they're not worth the trouble. Our system of selecting streets on a block should get you to the right part of town. Okay. So here I have gone and selected Lawrence, and you can see now that I have a number of Ward AM results. I have a number of them. Okay, so you could actually go into each one of these, see the streets in them, and then go and look and view the microfilm. There are links there. But that's not the value of what we have designed for you. Instead, you can select another street on the block. You can select another street on the block. So I open up the select street, and what happened? Notice the new street list has few entries. Where did the other entries go? Where do they go? Well, after your first selection, when you selected Lawrence, the number of available street names on the list are reduced to just those from the listed Ward AMs. If your street name was missing from a Ward AM, that non-listed district would not contribute its street names to the reconstructed street list. Okay, so that's an important concept to understand. That's why if you don't see a street name on the list, that you should try to enter your block street names perhaps in a different order on the utility and see if that gives you more Ward AM possibilities to search. Now, I've selected another street on the block, Jefferson. My experience is to choose the cross street for the second and third choices to narrow down the area quickly. Choosing the back or parallel street, especially with long streets, Lawrence is long, gives many hits. I choose Master. So that's what I'm going to choose. And I chose Jefferson, getting ahead of myself here. And now I'm down to two Ward AMs. So what I do is I again look at select streets, and this time you can see Brenton is there. This time I'm going to choose master, and when I choose master, I now have 3 of them, and that's enough to define a unique ward AM. And it says the ED you want is 17 McCutcheon. Okay, so that's how I got down to a single ED with an elimination technique. All right, now you may have trouble with this utility. Can you check the city directories, the person's address? If the address came from another source, make sure it's the right one. Can you check the city's directory street index to see if the street shows there? There's a lot of information about each streets. Can you check a circa 1870 maps for the area to see if that street is on the map? And a very good one, a set of overlay maps, is this one that I have the address on the show notes for, and I'm going to show you in more detail how to use this in a second. Have you checked to see if the street name you have wasn't the original name in November 1870, especially if you're coming by getting your streets from a modern map? Now, you may not have noticed, but on this finder aid that we have, that on the bottom left it says click here if you wish to see street name changes for Philadelphia. When you click on that, you get a link to a folder of street name change tables, like so. And I'm going to show you one of these in action. But it turned out that Orkney, which is the modern name, provided another situation when I looked up, is that the old name, that I want to show you, and I'll do that first. So Brenton is the original name in 1870, and Orkney would be the name of that part of the street today. So here you can see Orkney is an interesting example. When I chose Lawrence and then I look for Orkney, it's actually on our street list. It's in Ward 19. Our previous example was in Ward 17. It shows in parentheses the AM's misspelling that I found, but I also had the map in front of me. I could see it was Orkney. Note that we're entering the back or parallel street here. Okay, back or parallel street. And if I look at select street from my third street, I'm nowhere near the block that I was looking for. There's no Jefferson or Master Street choices in sight. Now, it's not the utility's fault, at least in this case. And this, you can find this quite often and might not know, what's going on. Well, there's a couple of things, but street changes is a possibility. All right, let's actually look at one of these street change tables. This is a very good one from phillyhistory.org. So I enter Orkney as the modern street name, and now I want to find out what was it in 1870. And it shows me that Orkney was Britain in 1870. It gives me a specific location. If we go down the list, we see in 1858, Orkney was used instead of Orchard. So that's where the 1870 Orkney is probably from. Now, one of the problems and one of the headaches that I get with working with Philadelphia streets is many Philly street names are assigned to non-connecting small street segments. It creates a real problem for a street index. And you can see that it looked like perhaps Orchard was a bunch of different segments, and then slowly they were all named Orkney in this regard. Okay, our street finder aid is not going to be comprehensive for Philly's second 1870. You will see why in the last section, which discusses the problems I faced putting the street list together. But some of the problems are that there are street name changes, There's no commercial street names because they won't appear, the streets, on the census. There are no residents there. There will be no street listings. Rural areas often had no house numbers or street names. There are illegible census sheets, more than I could count. Therefore, I created incomplete street name lists. There are misspelled names, and there are street names on our finder aid that may not be found on the actual census sheets, and I'll show you why in a second. So, you have no luck with the one-step finder aid to get to a unique Ward AM? Well, remember, you can still use any resultant Ward AMs to work through their census images. But there still is another search technique, and that goes back to the beginning of this video when we talked about ward maps and the district definitions. If you feel your target address is accurate as to 1870 and can be located on that ward map, or perhaps a city directory street index with ward numbers, or the drawn census district boundary map discussed earlier, then get that number. And for wards, a one-step finder aid has 1870 ward numbers on the street list. It's like a street, except it's a ward number. If you choose the, quote, ward number start roll choice, it will lead to the beginning roll images. In some cases, there are two rolls for a single ward, A and B. Now, let me show you that. That might not be clear. So you open up the select street, you go to the wards, and let's say we're looking at Ward 15. And you know that your address is in Ward 15. So you're going to have to go through the whole roll. So you choose Ward 15, start film roll A, and I know where the Ward AM is that starts that roll, and that goes directly to that particular Ward AM. If I had chosen Ward 15, just the plain Ward 15, then I would see all the Ward AM districts in Ward 15 in alphabetical order, not the true sequence on the census film. In any case, there's going to be a lot of work going through the 600 or so images, or even more, for Ward 15. If the number is a district number, a one-step finder aid has many 1870 district numbers on the street list. Not all of them, because I don't have all the definitions. If you choose the number census district, it will show you the Ward AMs in that district linked to the census images on the film rolls. So here's that search. I did the select street, and I go down, and let's pick 4th Census District. When I pick 4th Census District, it shows me all of the Ward AMs that are in the 4th Census District. And then what we can do is we can look at them. So this is what it happens here. I've selected 4th Census District. I have 3 Ward AMs here. Do I have to look at all 3? Well, what I can do is I can open up, let's say, to GAW, G-A-W. See, there's a question mark there. I'm not quite sure that's the real name, but difficult to read the script in those days. And if I look inside of that, and let's look inside of that, see, I open that up, I can see that, hey, they're close to the Delaware River and the Philadelphia Navy Yard. So if my address isn't close to that, I can exclude this. I don't have to go through it and look at the other 2 wards AM and decide from their list of streets what I should choose. This method could have an even higher coverage and resolution than my street list from the census sheets. I want to repeat that. This method of finding these districts and your address on them, this method could have an even higher coverage and resolution than my street list from the census sheets. But we'll get you to the film from the districts, view microfilm. Okay, let me tell you about some special handling that you should be aware about on the one-step finder aid. Roll 1426 encompasses Ward 14, and I call it chronology, chaos, compensation. So this is from part of my worksheets. Here's Ward 27. You can see that column on the left, with a mixture of census districts. So 89, 90, 89, those are the high numbers. The other numbers, 8, 6, 5, are the precincts. And the second column, by the way, is the image number that each of these starts on. Each of these Ward AM starts on. Now, if you notice that TJ Lister has TJ Lister 1 and TJ Lister 2, TJ did two separate precinct sequences. I could have lumped them into one district number, but the definitions for Ward 27 census districts are missing. Remember, they're missing, and I don't know which district number would be correct, and it's not on his sheet. It doesn't show 89 or 90. Don't know. Let's turn to what happens in Ward 14. It's crazy. So here is the chaos of Ward 14, the 1870 Philly recount version of 52 card pickup. What I want you to see is there are only 11 AMs here. If we choose one of them, like J. Macaulay, we find out that J. Macaulay's census sequences have been broken up. Like someone took all these people's work, threw them up in the air, and then just picked up sheets in any sort of order. It's crazy. It's actually crazy. How are we going to handle this? Well, what can we do? Here I use Barton Street to force the 14 J. Macaulay Census District to appear. So now we're in a single ward AM. They're not multiple wards AM on that. They're not multiple areas. It's just one area that J. Macaulay did. So what happens when we press the view microfilm? Well, we get a list of beginning images for each of his segments. Now remember, we might be off by a little bit. So if you click on one of these, make sure that you're at the start of the segment for Macaulay and have the right page. Okay, just be careful on that. But this is the only way we could figure it out. We certainly can't take the film, cut it up, and glue it back together again. That's not going to work. A second anomaly, that there is an out-of-place part of Ward 5 in Ward 4's census film. There's only one Ward AM. So here is Franklin's Ward AM. He's the assistant marshal. And on the top he says that I'm doing the 14th district, the 5th ward. That's at the end of Ward 4 roll 1418. So there's an extra piece of this particular roll that shouldn't be there. It's in the wrong film roll, but that won't be a problem with our finder aid and associated tables. I know where this is, and that's not going to be a problem. If you were doing this on your own and you knew that the person was in the 5th ward and went to the 5th ward film, you won't find it there. You won't find it there. And a third thing, which I'll add this, although it doesn't have much to do with our finder aid per se, is roll 1445. 1445 is about the first enumeration in June, about Philadelphia. If you go to the Family Search website, and this is where they have the Philadelphia census films and their descriptions, and very nice. I did most of my work off of this, and the addresses are there and on the show notes. And start to look at the definitions that we originally showed. And you see on the top that we have 2 Ward 26, the first enumeration, and then it jumps from roll 1414 to 1415 to the second enumeration. Well, Philadelphia has wards 7, 27, and 28. What happened to them? If we go down to the bottom, we're at the end of the second enumeration, and we're in roll 1444 and 1445. You can see they overlap in their election districts. They overlap. Well, what turns out is that roll 1445 has the first enumeration, is the first enumeration for wards 27 and 28. That's where the wards 27 and 28 are. It's easy to see how Family Search got fooled by the content page of this roll. These microfilms from the National Archive usually has some sort of a content page. And here we are, we're in roll 1445, and it clearly says that it's second enumeration. Clearly says that. But if you actually look at the census sheets in there, you'll see they were enumerated in June, which is the first count. And in addition to that, it includes first count input information. So typically, I advise people always to go to this content sheet to make sure you're in the right film. In this case, it would mislead you. The National Archive has a website that shows the films, the description of the films, not the links to them. I'll show you that here. And as you can see, they actually tell you that it's the first enumeration, 1445. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is how I produced in 1870 Philadelphia second enumeration finder rate for each Ward AM. How I did get a street list for each of these. For Philadelphia's 1870 second count finding aid, my primary resource, as I've been emphasizing, was the census sheets, AM maps. The best resources for such a street name and transcription just weren't found. Because of this, streets that had no residences, such as commercial streets, don't appear on the census sheets and won't appear on our finder aid. And that's a real loss. My Part 2 1870 video showed where to look for street names on Philadelphia's second count census sheets. It may not be obvious, they're all over the place, there's no standard, and the problems with misspelled names. Interpreting old script names also was difficult. Many Philadelphia census districts were easy to transcribe with prominent and legible street names, but I would encounter illegible, unfamiliar, cut-off street names because the names were in margins that were not fully filmed, and I could figure out some of them by checking a city map. So let's do an example. Here we have actually Stratford Place, but I didn't know what it was initially. You can see it was probably a place. In fact, sometimes when you go through a sequence of sheets, you'll see it on one sheet and then it'll start to be cut off. So let's try and figure out what's the name of this place and how I checked it out. So I used this map from this Geohistory Network. Really nice little map. I clicked on the 1870 Philadelphia Atlas because that's the closest to 1870. And unfortunately, it doesn't include all of the entire Philadelphia area. It does not include. It does include what I'm looking for in this example. So let's go in there, and I can see in the neighborhood, look, there's a Stratford Place. That must be the beginning of the name of that, Stratford Place. Now, this is a good illustration of changing street names over time, because now I can choose another year atlas to see what the neighborhood has changed like. It's really kind of cute. And if I do that, and now I'm going to choose the 1895 Philadelphia Atlas, well, now Stratford Place is now Stratford Street. All the others look like the same. And if I choose another one like 1910, Stratford Place is no longer there. It's now St. James Street, and neither are any of the other streets. They've all been renamed. It looks like Philadelphians get bored easily. I think that's the only conclusion I can make. So that's really a nice resource. I could check the street name spelling on the directory of street indexes. So remember, I showed you this earlier. Here's Stratford Place's entry. Not only can it contribute streets around the lookup place, because it tells me it's between this, and it's from Rose Alley, and there's Walnut, Locust, etc. That can all go in my street list. But the listing shows the ward number of the lookup. I pointed that out earlier. Okay, so the ward number shows. Another difficult situation. There's no street name on the sheet because it's been cut off. It's not even there. But there are house numbers. Or I have ambiguous street names that I can't figure out the spelling. It's not on any 1870 map or street index. So the solution is, from the resident name, go to the city directory and get the street name. So here's the example. I suddenly saw in the corner here some sort of place. Didn't look, I couldn't figure out what that was. And it's the back of another lane. And often what you see on these sheets is back on the sheet, indicating some sort of place back of the regular address. In most cases, you'll see back and there won't be a name of it. But in this case, it's a small place off of a lane. Here, at least, you can see the name. So I come here and I'm looking for the street name. It's not on the city directory. Oh, but look at all the number of small alleys, courts, and places off of specific addresses, such as Nevin Place, which is from 1307 Carlton. Actually, I couldn't find that on my maps even. So I don't know the street name of the occupations or the occupations of the people on the census sheet to help with the city directory lookups, but I do know the house number. So this is kind of great. So I am looking for Alex Long, and I might have even looked it up as Alex Song initially. And lo and behold, there he is, Alexander Long, engineer, house 8, and there is the spelling of this street that gave me fits. Using this technique, however, I don't think I reached a 50% success rate looking up names with a house number, maybe because of the mostly rural location. Now, there's situations where there's no street name and no house number. What am I going to do? This is a situation mainly of rural areas. And so, as a last resort, I've got the street names from the 1880 census for the area. It's either this or nothing. So the protocol was I looked for the 1880 enumeration district number where the most number of the 1870 Ward AM families lived. In fact, I looked up a child from 1870 so I could see the family unit. I transcribed the 1880 streets from that assumed same area to the 1870 Ward AM street lists. And obviously there are lots of assumptions here using the street names from this method. That's why I indicated that my street list is incomplete. And you might have to go to the ward or census district. Okay, I have a second enumeration overview essay online. We put it on the Steve Morse website. There's also a link from the utility itself. I would suggest you might read it. It also describes how to use the finder aid, the one-step finder aid. This has been another of my JDW talks. I have YouTube talks on genealogy topics, census resources, Ellis Island immigration, natural history topics, virtual birding field trips, birding optics, Orange County birds, and novelty zithers and biology songs. I must admit that this particular video was difficult to put together, especially keeping all of the names of the units, trying to be consistent with those as well. So I hope that was understandable. There is material in the essay and other areas to explain how to use our 1870 finder aid on the Steve Morse One-Step website. Have fun. Bye-bye.